Everyone to sleep. Babies are not. Right. Hi, good afternoon. Welcome to RJ Julia Booksellers. How are you today?
Great.
Good. We are very excited to have with us here author Laura Hankin to discuss her new book, One Star Romance. This latest novel has received rave reviews from renowned authors such as Jodi Picoult, and according to Annabelle Monaghan, best-selling writer of The Same Time Next Summer, Laura's One Star Romance will go down in history as the most ironically named novel ever. She gives 5 giant stars to this funny, twisty, and emotionally authentic story of true love and long friendship, concluding, "I absolutely adored it." So we had Annabelle with us a short time ago, so I was excited to read her review, and of course Jodi Picoult. The review there. Laura is the author of Happy and You Know It, A Special Place for Women, and The Daydreams. Her musical comedy has been featured in publications like the New York Times and the Washington Post, and she's developing projects for film and TV. She lives in Washington, D.C. And fun fact, Laura's husband and baby are here.
It's her first author event ever.
I put down the fun fact was that you once fell off a treadmill twice in the same day, but I added in with a fun fact about
I knew we
Kristan.
were friends.
Laura's in conversation with Kristan Higgins, New York Times, USA Today, and Publishers Weekly best-selling author of more than 20 novels.
24.
24, more than 20.
This is my local indie, so.
Nice. Which have been translated into 19 languages and have sold millions of copies worldwide. Books have received dozens of awards and accolades, including starred reviews from multiple sources. And latest book, Look on the Bright Side, is a funny, romantic, and emotionally satisfying read about how life's detours can often bring the greatest rewards. So this is where I tied in with the falling off the treadmill, because Kristan lives in Connecticut. She's a neighbor of mine. We went to the same high school. That's what I'm talking about, Mercy. With her firefighter husband and a variety of rescued pets. You'll notice on all Kristan's books, they have a dog on the front, and the dog features prominently. She's the mom of 2 and a loving grandmother who enjoys gardening, visiting national parks, and mixology, which hopefully would not lead to any similar treadmill incident. So let's give a warm RJ welcome.
Yeah, Lauren's such a fan. You know, I love this book, and you came up with a really cute way to ease into our discussion.
Yes, I thought that we should play a game related to 1-star reviews. But we don't want to offend anybody. So we're going to read, because it's Bookstore Romance Day, we're going to read some 1-star reviews of classic novels. The authors are all dead. These are from Goodreads. And we want to see if you can guess what the book is based on its 1-star review. So we will go, one review at a time. And if you think you know what the book is, just shout it out.
And you could possibly win these elegant sunglasses.
Retail value $500. Sticker. Retail value $501. So, all right. The first review for our first book is Jesus Christ, Just Have Sex.
Prime Prejudice.
Yeah. All right. Would you like to read our second book?
Okay. Everything in this book could have been sorted out. Like, damn kids, stop being idiots and think outside the box a little bit. Damn kids is your clue. Romeo and Juliet.
The other one that's related to the Pride and Prejudice review for Romeo and Juliet was needs more smut. All right. Our final book is I love main character, but honestly, imagine being friends with that bee. Like, imagine trying to convince her to leave male lead, and she's like, IDK, and you're like, he called you ugly?
Oh. You probably know that, right? I'm sorry. Is it Jane Eyre?
It is Jane Eyre. Well, you can have these two. And the other one from that is the whole thing could have been a 20-page short story about the lady in the attic. Thank you for playing that one game, and congratulations, Megan.
When I looked up some 1-star reviews when she said that idea, and there was one that was like room and moon don't even rhyme. I can't believe this got published. And that was good night.
I also spent a lot of time on the Goodnight Moon 1-star Goodreads page. It's very entertaining.
So first, to get this out of the way, how did you come up with the idea for this book, Laura?
So this book is about a maid of honor who has to walk down the aisle at her best friend's wedding with a man who gave her novel 1 star on Goodreads. And I came up with the idea because of the time that I had to walk down the aisle at my friend's wedding with a man who gave my book 1 star on Goodreads.
So in the book, we have the 2 friends, Natalie and Gabby. They've been best friends since college. They're like sisters from another mister. And Gabby gets engaged to Angus, and Angus's best friend is Rob. And Rob meets Natalie, they hit it off, and then he learns that she's, an author. He reads the book like the night before the wedding and posts his review the night before the wedding. Did that happen with you?
No, so the timeline was different. Also, I had never met this man before. We didn't like have a spark. He is not my husband. No, I did not. Actually, my husband was like, please clarify that I am not this man. And he has only ever given me 5 stars to my knowledge. There was that New York Magazine article. Did you all read this? Somebody wrote into an advice columnist and was like, I think my husband has created a fake account and is review bombing me on Goodreads. Yeah, it was wild. But going back to my real life story, apparently he bought the book because he'd heard that, a friend of a friend had written a novel and he wanted to be supportive. He read it and it was not his thing, and he just liked to use Goodreads to keep track for himself. So he left it a 1-star review.
Did he say anything? Or just the 1 star?
It was just the 1 star.
Wow.
And I, at the time, as I was mentioning to you earlier, it was my first book. Nobody had sat me down and been like, Laura, there is a place on the internet that authors should never go, and that is their own Goodreads page. Because you might read the most beautiful reviews ever that, say, congratulations, you did everything you wanted to do with this book, or you will just read the most casually devastating thing and be like, that is the truth about my writing.
Yeah, I think that's you read 100 good reviews, but the one sentence that says you weren't good is the one that you're carrying with you for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
So
I still remember word for word the first 1-star review that I ever got. Stunningly boring and pedestrian. Yeah.
I remember mine too. I don't see what the fuss was about.
Oh my gosh. Well, clearly they are wrong.
So this book to me is it's pitched as a rom-com, and it certainly is romantic and funny, but it's also the story of a friendship, and it takes place over 10 years. That was interesting to me because most romantic comedies are like 3 months, including my own, maybe 6. So how did you decide to write a book that spanned a decade, and what were some of the challenges of that? Because you really have to, string out this romance, this friendship, and all the ups and downs of your 20s, I guess.
Yeah. So it started for me in trying to figure out why had this man given her this review. Which I won't go into because it's semi-spoilery. But once I figured that out, I felt like they were just too at odds to really fall in love over the course of the wedding, or the week after the wedding. At first I was playing around with, are they both house sitting for their friends, or their friends are on their honeymoon or something like that. But it didn't feel grounded, and I really wanted this book to feel grounded. And so I was really stuck on the format. And then I went up to New York, where I had spent most of my 20s being very confused about my life, for a work event. And I was walking around all day and just looking at all my old spots and being like, I remember crying on the subway there and going on a terrible date there. And that's when it hit me that actually maybe this book takes place over the course of those years of your life where suddenly you and your friends start moving at very different speeds. And, your best friend with whom you've shared everything suddenly she's up at 2 a.m. with a baby while you're out at 2 a.m.,
Yeah.
trying to meet somebody. And that's when it really opened up for me and I got really, really excited to write it.
We fast forward through those 10 years, it's like 3 years later and things have happened. And
Yeah.
I really enjoyed that because like if you had done year by year, it might have not had as much impact.
Yeah.
But was it difficult at all to say like, okay, now they're 29 or something like that?
Yeah. So once I realized that they were only going to interact with each other when their mutual best friends were celebrating some new life milestone, I was like, great, have the structure.
Mhm.
But then, yes, you do get into the problem of you don't want every chapter to be like, let's catch up about what happened with them in between.
Yeah.
So I looked back at this novel One Day. I don't know if anybody's read One Day or watched the TV show recently, because that I felt was a very good model. And I was just trying to think like, how can we have a lot of action
Mhm.
here in each of these little set pieces?
Yeah, great. So there's four main characters in the story. We have Natalie and Rob, the author and the reviewer. And he's in a completely different world. He's an academic in linguistics, and she's, a commercial fiction author or trying to be. And then we have Gabby, who's her dynamic, great best friend, who seems to like have everything clicking into place right away. She gets a great job out of college. And then she meets this guy and Natalie doesn't think that he's the one, but it turns out he is the one. And she has a lot of feelings about that. And I had an experience too, where my best friend from college was engaged to my daughter, like, and I was like, like, what do you say and everything. And I loved that conundrum of you're seeing your friend maybe settle.
Yeah.
And what do you do as a best friend? How supportive can you be? And how does that kind of fester? And I loved how you portrayed that in the book. So how did you come up with Gabby and Angus? Because I loved them as a couple and I loved how much they did not fit together and how much they did.
Thank you. Yeah, I think it's a pretty relatable experience of us all being like, these two?
Yeah.
Really? I'm not sure. And in my experience, I've seen it go a couple of different ways, right? Sometimes your friend is with someone and you have concerns and you're correct and it doesn't end up working out. And sometimes the person really surprises you and turns out to be the perfect partner for your friend. And so not to spoil things too much, I wanted to have it be the latter and to basically have it be a lesson in empathy and in like, you don't know what's going on with somebody else's relationship. And people are different when they're alone with their partners than maybe the bluster that they put up in public or when you're trying to impress your partner's friends, because that can be a really scary thing.
Yeah.
I don't know if you remember when you were first with your husband and meeting his friends for the first time.
I'm terrified.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, meeting the parents is scary, but meeting the friends
Yeah, it's
is
almost worse,
Yeah.
right? Because they have such sway.
Mhm.
I have to say that one of my favorite topics in the world, I was just talking to a young friend last night, a 22-year-old, about female friendship, and that's a huge part of this book, about friends for a reason, friends for a season, and how incredibly important female friends are to just about every woman, and how it's often difficult to keep a friend from one season of your life when your lives start to go in different directions. And I loved how authentic this friendship was. One of my pet peeves in novels is like the perfect best friend who always has the sassy comeback and is always available for martinis and it doesn't really have anything to do except to be your best friend. But that was absolutely not the case with Gabby and Natalie. So how did you come up with their friendship and is that based on anything in your own life there of like the push and pull of female friendship?
Yeah, I mean, I remember in college and then moving to the city, I felt like my friends were more than my friends. I felt like they were my family. too, in a way. And, we would almost be each other's significant others. Sometimes we would be plus ones to parties. And it was so wonderful, like this beautiful season of our lives, sharing everything with each other. And then I think when my friends perhaps met their people before I did, it was a little scary, especially not knowing if I was ever going to find my person. And now I think we have some friends, and our timelines have come back together again. Some friends, our timelines are very different. I think adding in children really can throw off the timelines. And, I think about my best friend when she had her first child. It was years before I was ready to have a baby. And I just didn't know what to do. Like, I came over and I brought her Goodnight Moon. And I was like, have you heard of Goodnight Moon? Because your baby might like this book. I'm an author, so I know. And now I'm like, oh God, yeah, everybody reads Goodnight Moon. And I think I feel lucky that she was not like, oh God, Laura does not know how to interact with me anymore, because the main thing that I'm focusing on in this moment in my life is my child. And that we've been able to come back together again. But so I wanted to write a story that I felt like was honest about the fact that friendships might fade at times, but it also doesn't mean that they have to go away forever.
Right.
I wanted to kind of sneak in the friendship and make it its own romantic comedy with like a third act breakup and the grand gestures, and say like it is the good friendships in your life are worthy of that. Even if I think we have this idea that friendships, the point of them is to be easy. Right. But sometimes they're not, and that doesn't mean that you just have to cut them off.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I loved that, and I loved that they were at different times very understanding and kind to each other, and then at times very irritable and snappy with each other, and in one scene, which I don't think we'll give too much away, but Natalie says like, you're my person, and I'm supposed to be your person, and Gabby says no.
Yeah.
I'm married, I'm a mother now, and it was kind of a glass of cold water in her face, and I mean, in a lot of ways too, this book is a coming of age story, because it's about, these two young women, Natalie especially, because she's the point of view character, finding her feet in adulthood. And she always thought it would be me and Gabby, and almost immediately it's not her and Gabby. And I loved over this 10-year span of seeing her come into her own. So I really, the cover is adorable, very on trend marketing cover, right? There, we love cartoon covers. But I think this book had so much depth to it. And I mean, the wedding scene is one of the funniest scenes I've ever read.
Oh, thank you.
And I was like crying, laughing, but also like my toes were curled more. Like I was so uncomfortable. It was so funny. And it was just such a gorgeous combination of emotion. Like, Natalie's watching her friend married, maybe the wrong guy, and she's got all these mixed feelings about it. And here she is with her reviewer as the best man. And yet it's also like really emotional and beautiful in its own way. So how do you do that? How do you take something, such a funny scene, and imbue it with all these other emotions and have it all work together? Because I thought it was genius, really.
Thank you. It's sort of funny. I wish that I had like here's my 5-step plan of how I do that.
Slip me the notes.
Yeah. I'm always desperate to read those guidelines myself, but I feel like in some ways I'm kind of fumbling around in the dark, and I know when it's wrong. And then I just keep trying until I get it right. But I think my number one rule when I'm writing a big scene like that is that I never want to go too long without a joke, and I never want to go too long without some heart as well, right? Like I don't want 15 pages in the book where you don't smile or laugh once.
Right.
But I also don't want it to turn into pure slapstick. And even in the moments that do feel a little slapsticky, I want to ground it in like, oh my God, but how are these people actually feeling?
Yeah. I think the reason it was so funny, and as someone who also writes comedic scenes, you know, it can't just be visually funny. It's gotta be really relatable.
Mhm.
You have to be with the character in that moment of awkwardness or dismay, and because it's never funny to the character, you know.
Right.
It's always horrifying for the character and fun for us.
I mean,
To read, right?
Yes, in some ways I go back to my moment of transformation when I fell off the treadmill twice in one day. Which I was like in high school, and it was the most embarrassed I'd ever been in my life. And I like went home and I cried for hours after this because it was in front of like the boys track teams. Yeah, and like the man next to me on the treadmill was like, I think you need to try something else. But you know, then like a week later, I was telling the story to a friend and turned it into comedy.
Yeah.
And they were like, that's an amazing story. And now I like it so much that I use it in my author bio.
Great.
Yeah. So
And I think we can all relate to, you know, this will be funny someday. That moment. My daughter went on a honeymoon that I should write into a book because it was a disaster of a honeymoon. You know, monsoon season and like rotting piles of seaweed, 100 degrees out and raining and the drug cartels and stuff. Really, you know, like stray dogs chasing them, you know. And she came home and I was like, so how was it? She's like, it was horrible. And then my husband and I were crying with laughter at her food poisoning and just so we were grateful that her
so generous.
to have another one. So I've read a couple of your other books and they have been a bit darker. So Happy You Know It was a book that I just loved and it's about wealthy Manhattan moms and their nannies and their privilege and money and Instagram lives. And something you also explore in A Special Place for Women, that, you know, privilege and outward appearances and stuff. The Daydreams is about the reunion of stars from a teenage show for teenagers when the kids were all young stars. And One Star Romance is a bit lighter, I think, you know, serious things happen in it, but it's not quite so satirical. What made you lean into that? Is it the current feeling? Was it just like, I want to write a rom-com?
I think as I write more, I want to tell stories with more and more heart and more empathy. And maybe it does have to do with the world a little bit and feeling like, oh God, we need to feel good at this point. But I've just always been obsessed with love stories ever since I was little. Like even the books that I would read that weren't specifically love stories, the part that I gravitated to the most was the love, like Little Women or Ella Enchanted was my favorite. Yes. Oh, yeah. If anybody hasn't read that one. And so I think with my novels, I kept trying to sneak in more and more of a romantic comedy into them as like a supporting character or, you know, a B story.
Yeah.
And because I was like, I'm working with my editor and I like working with my editor and she expects a certain type of book from me. So I'm not going to pitch her a romantic comedy. And then I pitched her something else for my new book idea. And she was like, have you ever thought about writing a romantic comedy? And I was like, so glad you asked. Here we go. Yeah, exactly.
So what's your writing day like are you a full-time author?
I am lucky enough to be a full-time author at the moment. I also know that things could change at any time. The writing business is unpredictable. But yeah, so it's definitely changed since having a child. And I'm still figuring out what it is now. But pre-baby, it was, I would wake up, I would leave my phone at home and I would get a coffee and I would just go on a long walk with a notebook in my pocket. Because I think it's so important to be bored. As a writer and like force yourself to just look at things in the world as opposed to look at things on your phone. So that's how I would start my day. And then usually if if it was working correctly, I would come home and be able to write for a couple of hours. And then maybe think a little bit more, or waste some time on social media and then write a little bit more. That's the secret sometimes, I don't know if you feel this way, is that we actually only do like 3 hours of work in a writing
Well,
day.
3 hours of writing in
Yeah.
a writing day, but a lot of thinking and processing and staring at the blinking cursor.
Right.
And a drooling at, you know. So, yeah, it's the actual fingers on the keyboard is a lot shorter. You know,
Yeah.
if we could just make those 3 hours perfect, we could write, 3 books a year, but we can't. Well, we
We're not
can.
all Danielle Steele.
Yeah. There was a time I wrote 2 books a year and I was like,
He's amazing.
I know.
How do you even come up with that many ideas you can be excited about?
Roberta, I said, who writes this is super Burnett as well. How many books do you write a year?
Yeah, one book,
year.
every 9 months.
Yeah.
Just like a baby.
Yeah.
Like a baby.
Yeah, you have your recovery period, you
Right.
know, postpartum period.
Right.
Yeah, does it take you a long time to come up with an idea and kind of massage it into enough of a story?
It depends. I think on average, maybe I spend about a month coming up with the idea, and then kind of my favorite part of the process is like walking around and daydreaming about it,
Yeah.
and it can be anything.
Yeah.
What about you?
I would say a month, for the idea, and then another month or 2 to kind of formulate it into an outline of like, so this will be the structure, and here's how we'll, these are the big scenes that I know I'll write, and I'll maybe write some of those scenes and then come back to them. But, yeah, I love that beginning period where you have like just an idea, like, what if there were these 2 best friends,
Yeah.
one of them married, somebody, and the other one felt left behind, and she had a sister, kill the sister, Yeah, it's really wonderful. No, they're divorced,
And then you
so-
walk around, you're like, they're divorced.
Yeah, that father's dead, and it's so easy and free at that point. It is really fun. So I want to leave time for questions from the audience, but can you tell us what you're working on now?
So I am like in a newer part of a new book. Again, I feel like the baby kind of put the
Yes,
schedule,
yes.
the normal schedule back, but it is also in the romantic comedy world, but with a focus on female friendship as well.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Right. So, questions from you guys? You are required to ask questions.
If not, we will call on you.
Everybody has a.
Maybe.
Can you talk a little bit about the projects that you have in development? Cause I know your bio or she was saying it, for film or TV.
I'm probably not supposed to, but I can tell a little bit of some stuff. There's a screenplay that I care very deeply about. It's about a high school student who finds out that she gets the lead in her school play unexpectedly, the same fall that her mom is dying, and inspired by real life. But I think similarly to what we were talking about, it's like funny as well as emotional. And it feels like we might finally be getting somewhere with it, but also it's Hollywood, it could all
You never
fall
know.
apart.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think a funny thing that I've found in taking meetings about optioning my books for film and TV is that a lot of people get very excited about the possibilities of things in Hollywood. And when you first take the meetings, you're like, oh my God, you mentioned that you think this person would be a good director, or this person would be a good star. That means it's happening.
Right.
And it never
It
happened.
doesn't, yeah. Yeah. And also the Hollywood people like, this is the best thing we've ever read. We love it so much. Oh my God,
Yeah.
and then, you don't hear from them ever again.
It's like a bad thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is like a bad day. But
It is, or then they call you back 6 months later and you're like, oh, you again, but yeah, until they cast it is when you can start getting excited from what I've been told.
Yeah.
I've had a couple books optioned, and one is the screenplay is being written by a noted screenwriter, and I'm like, oh, when do you think you'll have it done? And she's like, I don't know.
It's funny how like your number one priorities are not necessarily everybody
Yeah.
else's number one.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's all to be determined.
Yeah. But one star romance, we are like having some conversations. But we'll see if they go anywhere.
Yeah. I think it would be a great movie. You write very visually, and so you really see the book as you're reading it. So.
I really like writing for the screen because I feel like the thing that I'm worst at is writing details or like describing what the scene looks like. And in scripts, you're not supposed to. They're like, don't describe the
That's so
tree.
interesting. I felt like I could really see things so clearly. I mean, maybe that's just like the perfect combination, but like the whole wedding, like I was sweating, like it wasn't really, and I felt like it was so clear in my mind. So, other questions from you guys?
There's one in the back there.
Just a silly question. Could you talk a little bit about the inspiration for the zip line scene?
Yes. So, oh yeah, there's a scene involving a zip line in the book, and can I talk about the inspiration for that? My husband one day came home and was like, a US congressperson ziplined into his own wedding. And I watched the video for that and was like, this should probably go into the book.
Gives you a moment.
Yeah. But if you want a visual, just Google Tom Malinowski.
Takes a lot of guts.
Yes, it does. It does. There are services. I checked, like people, zipline services will show up to your wedding.
Okay.
Yeah.
I know, in case weddings aren't over the top enough, right?
Yeah.
Rosie wants to put a shark in the next book.
Oh. Yeah, that's gonna be where I get my ideas from now on. It's just whatever random toy. I have to write a novel about that. Well, we'd also talked about maybe, since we have one pair of sunglasses left, if anybody wants to share their worst date, since it is bookstore romance day. Talk about the flip side. I know you had said you had some.
I do, and I won't get the sunglasses. I already have those. Sunglasses at home. Not really. But yeah, I was on a date. I had just been dating this guy, and he was a Yaley, and I was living in New Haven, and he was like my first real adult boyfriend. He was a graduate of Yale. He had a real job and stuff. And I was like, oh my gosh, we're so perfect. We both were pride of the Yankees, and Lou Gehrig was our favorite baseball player of all time. And we're like, oh my God, it's kismet. And then like 4 dates in, he had me meet him at the Union League Cafe, which is a super fancy restaurant. Like, also so excited. I went there. I got there first before cell phones. So I'm just like, chatting with the bartender. I order my line spreads because I'm so sophisticated. And then I'm waiting. And then this guy comes and he's talking to the maitre d', and then they both look over at me. Oh God. And he's like, hey, are you Kristan? So I'm Joe's friend. I'm like, oh my God, is he okay? And he's like, yeah, he's breaking up with you. He puts the bartender, I'm like, do I have to pay for this? So he sent his friend to dump me. And yeah.
You get the glasses, I'm sorry.
If anybody wants to put up a challenge.
It's a high bar.
I mean, bad dates are a cornerstone of my books. If I don't have a bad date, and I feel ashamed. But I love writing the bad dates, and especially when my character is actively searching for love, and you get like the guy who brings his sister on the date, and they both start crying over childhood memories, trauma. But there's this whole wedding situation. It was like one long bad day, but yeah, does anybody else have bury your souls and you might use it as a safe space? Yeah, safe space, right.
Well, congratulations.
I do all. I have so many in my own person.
That's how I'm thinking of all the ones I have.
I have a
Should I
question,
share?
not
Oh,
related to bad date, but you were saying how you walk with a notebook and you write, do you, and this is for both of you, do you have like a lot of running ideas already? That you then, when it's time for you to write your next book, like you could grab one of those, like, do you already have a list going? Or is it really, you're starting from scratch every time?
I feel like at this point, I'm mostly starting from scratch every
Really?
time. Yeah. But earlier in my career, I did have more of a list. And, you know, there were times when I would go back to the list and be like, oh yeah, actually, I'm still really interested in this, even though I wrote it down a year ago. Why don't I try playing around with that?
I have a running list, but whenever I go to write a new book, the idea that I want to write about is not on that list, you know? And so I'm like, oh, you're worthless, you know? But, you know, it'll be like, you know, one line ideas of, you know, a woman's ex-husband is dating a woman who's like her doppelganger. That's it, you know,
Oh.
and you know, I'm like, okay, what can I do with that? I don't know, write something else, you know?
Yeah.
But it is fun, like I do get ideas often from listening to people eavesdropping in restaurants. It's a special skill of mine, and you know, anytime someone is breaking up in public, I'm like. Do you mind if I film this? So, yeah, a lot of my ideas come from just like the briefest of interactions. So
People watching.
when people watching, when, you know, you just pay attention to the world and you get so much fodder.
That's why no one wants to share their.
I know. My father is always like, I have to be careful what I say.
Now, do you wanna read a little bit from the book?
Oh my gosh.
Did I put you on the spot?
I hadn't prepared and, oh, but you have said that you sometimes like to make audience
Yeah,
members
okay.
shout out a
Let's so I
random number.
shout out a page and she'll read from the page. So
56.
start there.
56. I hope it's a good page. Let's see. Okay. The bed and breakfast Gabby had chosen for the wedding had an absolutely charming garden area, bordered by a forest in the back. A pond stretched along one side of the property, its smooth cerulean surface dotted with lily pads. This is like the only part where I describe everything. Gabby had designed many of the decorations herself, and the whole scene looked like one of her paintings come to life. White wooden chairs sat in rows over soft green grass. The sky was clear, the only clouds dotting it so fluffy, Natalie longed to reach out and run her fingers through them. It looked like the platonic ideal of a pastoral scene, and it felt like being stuffed inside a furnace.
Do you narrate your book?
I do, yeah.
Okay.
I had to audition
You
to be able
did.
to read my own speech.
You have acting in your past, and so that's really neat because most of the books where the author narrates, it's like a memoir or something. You're not, you know.
Well, I think they were surprised. So I think sometimes authors do actually ask to be able to read their own fiction. And they have them do the audition as like a test, basically to show them that it's hard work.
It's very different, yeah.
And when I did mine, I guess they listened to it and they were like, oh, okay, she has a performing background. Sure, she
Yeah.
can do this.
Yeah, that's really, it's very unusual. Most of us don't get to like screen our narrators. I do, but I didn't at first, and the woman they assigned was so great. I'm like, can we always use her?
Yeah.
I know she and I are really good friends, but and you know, like I think because I've had so many books out and I have a popular audio book by that they will send me like, and who would you like for Cynthia or Ellie, you know, and so I'll give you a couple of names, but most of us are just kind of assigned them most of the time. So it's really neat that you do it, and it's not always a win. You know, like I listened to Still Alice, and the author read it, and she's a scientist. So it was not like it wasn't a great experience. I feel bad saying this, because it's such an amazing book. It's such an important book. Lisa Genova.
Yeah.
So it's a book about a woman who has dementia, and I think like a really good narrator would have elevated it a bit, but it was also in the early days of that. But I listened to a sample of yours, and I didn't check the credits, but I'm like, I think that might be her. So well done. That's really
Thank
cool.
you. It was funny though, that with the first book, Having You Know It, they said I could do it, but they were like, because you don't have experience, we will make sure that we give you a really hands-on director. And,
What was that like? I don't know anything about that.
like a hands-on director.
What's it like? I just picture you like in your closet reading the book into a microphone.
So the nice thing is I was able to go to his studio.
Okay.
Yeah, because I feel like whenever I do have to record interviews, it is like you go into your closet and you
Right.
drape blankets around you to muffle the sound. But so we were supposed to have a lot of time. It was going to be really relaxed, and then we were going to record it in April 2020. And on March 10th, they called me and were like, can you get into the studio tomorrow? The director will not have read the book. Just read as quickly as you possibly can. Hope you get it done before the city shuts down.
Wow.
So it was a bit of a trial by fire.
Yeah.
But
Does it take a long time?
yeah, it takes like 4 days to record a book, generally. You drink a lot of tea.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And do you learn anything by reading your books out loud?
Yes. Well, first of all, you notice typos. And you notice parts where you're like, why, that could have been one sentence. Why is it 5? So it makes me think that I need to actually just start reading all my books out loud before I finish the edits. But it's also so fascinating to have a director there who will stop you sometimes and be like, I actually think the intention behind that line is different than how you just read it.
And you're the
Yeah,
author?
and I'm like, no. But actually, a lot of the times she is correct.
Yeah.
And I just wasn't fully thinking about it in the moment,
Yeah.
or she saw it in a new way, and I liked her way better. So it's sort of a preview of what happens to a book when you put it out into the world, and then readers are reading
Right.
it and interpreting it.
And
in
they say
their own
nobody
ways.
reads the same book,
Yeah.
because we all bring our histories and ideas with us into every book. That's so interesting. It's really-
So we probably have time for one more question, and then both authors have graciously volunteered or been voluntold, as we said in Human Resources, to sign copies of their books. We have backstock, we have Kristan's books, and we also, I just want to mention, I didn't mention it before, but we have 2 other authors here today, which is pretty exciting. Lucy Burdett, and she writes mystery kind of, are they cozy mysteries? That's how I describe them, but
Cozy.
cozy,
Yeah.
related, which is always good. Key West, so Florida, key lime pie,
Food,
Food,
yeah.
very
so
good.
much food.
and death and mystery.
My favorites.
And then Megan Collins, so, and she writes thrillers, mysteries, a little more noirish than key lime pie. So I just wanted to mention how I thought that was so special that other authors came to support our authors today. Lisa was here last week, 2 weeks ago. So many nice books piled up in my to be read file. I can't even remember when I was here. Does anyone have any additional questions before we move to the signing line? You wanna pick up?
Thanks for coming. This.
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
really excited to read it.